The U.S. transfers cluster bombs to Ukraine. On July 7, 2023, President Biden made a significant announcement declaring the United States' intention to provide cluster munitions to Ukraine. This decision generated considerable controversy due to the fact that many countries have banned the use of these weapons. In light of these developments, we will now delve into a discussion about the nature of cluster munitions, their potential benefits in the current situation in Ukraine, the reasons behind the global push to ban them in the late 2000s, and the convergence of various factors that led to the United States initiating their transfer at this particular time. But before we continue this great video, we would like to invite all of the info warriors to leave your funniest, topic-related comments and memes in the comment section. If you're keeping up with the latest developments in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, why not spread some love with a like and subscribe? Rumor has it that for every new subscriber, Putin's mustache twitches a little more. Alright, let's move on. What are cluster bombs? Let's delve into some background information on cluster munitions. As the name suggests, they are explosive devices designed to disperse numerous smaller bomblets over a wide area. In the context of Ukraine, these cluster munitions would likely be fired from land-based systems rather than dropped from planes, as shown in the test run video. Each cluster munition contains multiple bomblets that disperse upon descent and detonate over a larger area compared to a single conventional bomb. From a tactical standpoint, Ukraine sees the value in utilizing cluster munitions. While initial battles in the war involved urban combat and ambushes, the conflict in eastern Ukraine has gradually transitioned to a more traditional trench warfare scenario. Clearing large sections of enemy trenches without the need for risky over-the-top assaults is historically advantageous. However, achieving this objective typically requires a significant quantity of standard artillery shells, which presents a resource constraint. Cluster munitions offer an appealing alternative for Ukraine due to their cost-effectiveness and the ability to achieve the desired impact in a single strike. Ukraine heavily relies on artillery, but lacks control of the skies, which hampers its ability to execute US-style shock-and-awe air campaigns. Instead, Ukraine has relied on its existing artillery resources to disrupt Russian supplies and logistics. However, it also needs to reserve some artillery capacity for planned trench operations in the future. The introduction of cluster munitions would not only enhance Ukraine's capabilities for trench operations, but also alleviate the strain on its existing artillery resources. It would allow Ukraine to allocate more artillery assets towards targeting enemy supplies and logistics. It is worth noting that bomblets are less effective against hardened targets, so Ukraine intends to prioritize their use for trench-related purposes, preserving them for the appropriate strategic objectives. Why are cluster bombs banned? Now let's explore why many countries have banned the use of cluster munitions. The primary concern lies in the problem of unexploded bomblets, commonly known as duds. Not all bomblets detonate upon impact, and these unexploded ordnance can pose a significant threat to civilians, even months or years after they were deployed. Touching a dud can result in severe injury or death, highlighting the indiscriminate nature and long-lasting danger of these munitions. The rate of duds varies depending on factors such as manufacturing quality. Estimates suggest that the dud rate can range from 10 to 40%, with the higher end reflecting Russia's stockpile. In contrast, the United States aims for a dud rate of just 2.35% in its cluster munition shipments. However, even with a lower dud rate, the presence of unexploded bomblets remains a concerning issue. This issue draws parallels to landmines, which continue to pose risks long after conflicts have ended. In 1997, diplomats convened in Ottawa to negotiate the Convention on the Prohibition of the Use, Stockpiling, Production and Transfer of Anti-Personnel Mines, commonly known as the Ottawa Treaty or the Mine Ban Treaty. The treaty prohibits the use, stockpiling, production, and transfer of anti-personnel mines, aiming to prevent civilian casualties caused by these indiscriminate weapons. Currently, 164 countries are party to the treaty, with the notable absence of the United States due to its use of landmines along the North and South Korean border. In 2008, diplomats gathered in Dublin to address the issue of cluster munitions and drafted the Convention on Cluster Munitions. The treaty seeks to ban the use, stockpiling, production, and transfer of cluster munitions, similar to the objectives of the Mine Ban Treaty. Despite its simplicity, with 111 countries as party to the treaty, notable absences include Russia, which has employed cluster munitions during its invasion of Ukraine, Ukraine itself, which had a small stockpile at the war's outset, and the United States. Since these countries have not ratified the Convention on Cluster Munitions, the use of cluster munitions is not illegal for them under international law. However, it is important to acknowledge that international laws lack enforcement mechanisms, and powerful leaders may not face consequences for violating them. Nonetheless, the United States acknowledges the concerns surrounding cluster munitions and had a deliberation period of almost 500 days before approving their transfer to Ukraine. The rationale behind this decision is that, if Ukraine, as the affected country and with future generations bearing the consequences, is willing to use them, there may be an argument for their limited use in this specific context. Why Ukraine needs cluster bombs. President Biden's decision to transfer cluster munitions to Ukraine was influenced by a combination of factors: the existence of excess stockpiles, a shift in Ukraine's offensive strategy, and inadequate planning from Western nations. Firstly, the Pentagon possesses a significant number of cluster munitions, with 10,000 bombs readily available in Europe and potentially millions more stored within the United States. Congressional Republicans recommended their transfer to Ukraine, considering that most NATO partners have banned their use, leaving the U.S. with limited options for employing them. The question arose as to when else these munitions would be suitable, if not for the current situation in Ukraine. The second factor revolves around the evolving dynamics of Ukraine's offensive. While progress has been made in certain regions like the Zaporizhia Axis, Bakhmut, and possibly Kherson, the nature of the operation has increasingly shifted towards attritional warfare. Such a strategy demands a significant amount of artillery. Although cluster munitions are not inherently necessary for this type of warfare, the shortage of available artillery ammunition brings attention to the need for additional support. The third factor is attributed to the West's own shortcomings and insufficient planning. Initially, U.S. strategic advisors assisted Ukraine in planning a successful insurgency, which did not prioritize heavy reliance on artillery. However, as the conflict persisted, it became apparent that Kyiv would not easily succumb. Unfortunately, both the United States and Europe failed to adequately prepare for increased artillery production. The reasons behind this lack of preparation are complex, but it underscores the shortage of artillery ammunition within Western forces. Given the urgent need for artillery support in Ukraine and the surplus of cluster munitions available, the decision was made to transfer them, despite their ban in 111 countries. The unique circumstances, including stockpile availability, the evolving offensive dynamics, and inadequate planning, prompted President Biden to opt for cluster munitions as a solution to support Ukraine's military efforts during this critical time.